Hi, and welcome to a special Ask the Mayor edition of Newsmakers. Since 2014, Santa Barbara's most popular local news analysis and commentary show. I'm Jerry Roberts. It is Friday, May 5th, 2023. Happy Cinco de Mayo to everyone. And I'm very pleased to welcome back to the program Santa Barbara Mayor Randy Rowse. Randy, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Lots to talk about this week, about news emanating from City Hall, the controversy over outdoor dining fees, the never-ending battle over short-term rentals, storm clouds over the city budget. And joining in the conversation with Mayor Rowse, two colleagues from our all-star lineup of top local journalists. I'm delighted to welcome Lily Dallow, Digital Content Director for KEYT. Lily, it's great to have you.
Yeah,
and Josh Molina, Santa Barbara's answer to Joe Rogan and the politics and policy reporter for Noozhawk. Thank you all for coming. Let's get right to it. Lily, I know you and Josh collaborated on a reporting project about the city council's action on those downtown promenade restaurant fees. I know you had some more questions hanging out there about it for the mayor, so go for it.
Yeah, definitely. That was my first freelance piece with Noozhawk. So it was, kind of dove right in. Yeah, I asked you a decent amount of questions at the time, none so much about the fees themselves, but now kind of circling back to that since the inspections are underway. How I kind of was just wondering, how do you plan to adapt moving forward, because it seemed the outcome was not entirely what you'd hoped for. So yeah.
There's the understatement of the week.
Well, it wasn't even about what I hoped for. I am as probably confused as any member of the public goes. I mean, what we did was had a select subcommittee work specifically with the staff to develop this set of fees around what we thought would work between totally portable and without roofs, all the way up to some of the grand Parthenons have been built in other parts of the city. And so we had a schedule of fees that was meant to address that, and meant to address kind of the equity between people that got this public right away for no charge for the last 3 years, and making it kind of even so other people that pay rent would be, should feel relatively equal to those folks. And we had that report. We voted on it. I think the vote was 4-2 to pass it and move it on to the agenda, or for consent. And we moved it on to consent. And Council Member Alejandra Gutierrez pulled it off of consent to chat about it some more, which is her right to do. But when you pull something off of consent, it's usually either up or down vote. You don't relitigate it at that point. So they decided to continue it and bring it on to the full administrative agenda, where, wow, we just ended up with zippity doo-dah. And my issues were two things. Number one, we completely subverted our normal process. So I don't even know what the score is anymore, nor does anyone else out there. That's my biggest concern. My second concern is that staff came up with a budget that it takes for us to maintain that area. And this was the fee recovery for that budget to do the maintenance on the street. And this wasn't even at the lowest tier. This was below the lowest tier. So, and for the people that thought it was unfair to charge, rents higher, you have to remember these are net rents. There's not, usually when you pay a commercial rent, you pay a fee, plus you pay the triple nets, which include property taxes, utilities, insurance, all those other things. So nobody pays $2 anywhere for anything. I'll promise you that. And here we are doing this with the public right away. So it's a head scratcher. It's frustrating, but I'm more frustrated by the lack of following procedure and the rules, because I don't know what the future is going to bring for anything right now.
Josh, do you recall another time when council took something off the consent calendar and sort of acted as broadly as they did on this?
No. There are times when it's pulled from consent to clarify a point, to ask something. It can be fairly minor. I think I have seen maybe somebody pull and explain why they've decided to maybe switch their vote a little bit. or something like that, but never a wholesale change in what they originally agreed to. I don't think it's a Brown Act violation, but breaks the spirit of the Brown Act, because if you are expecting that to be a formal finalization of what you agreed to at the last meeting, and then you pick up a newspaper or click online and you see that they did something different than what was on the agenda, because the range on the agenda was $3 to $10. It wasn't $2. So I think it very much breaks the spirit. And I think what bothers me about this is I know all the council members, and probably too well, but they know better. Like, they are using logic here to sort of explain why they should be able to do this. But if you put them at odds with somebody else, they very easily could say what they did was wrong and not in the spirit of good government. And so that's frustrating. Mike Jordan, who, Mike's a great guy. He's very knowledgeable. He loves the city. For him to argue zero fees is shocking. Like, it is just flat out, I can't believe you would do that. For Kristen and Mike to agree that zero fees is shocking. And so as a journalist, it just makes me feel, what conversations behind the scenes are happening that led us to
Yeah,
this?
that's the question. Who got to who, Randy?
Well, I've got, we got inundated with letters. There were some people that solicited letters. They sent out incorrect or misleading information about what we were up to that day, about how we were just plotting to take out all the parklets and close out or open up State Street, or whichever term you want to use for the status of State Street. And I actually explained, it was almost 400 of them, and I wrote a little cut and paste response, and I answered every single one of them. And about 100 of them wrote back to me and said, "Thank you for the clarification. I didn't understand what was going on." But that was quoted as saying, "Well, we got all these letters." And that's when I said, unfortunately, Josh is right in front of me recording this all, but that's when I basically said, why do we even have meetings? Let's just go check our email and pass the law based on that. So Josh is exactly right. Who expects what? One time it happened while I was out of office, was they did that with a deal they made with the real estate things. I think it was about the relocation, if I'm not mistaken. And they actually changed it, pulled it off consent and rechanged the deal, which meant the people that were there for the item weren't there for consent, because consent is just a second reading. That's it. You don't litigate it. So when it started to be litigated on the day it was pulled from consent, I called foul, as did the city attorney. So we're not going to relitigate this. So they said, well, other than that, let's just continue, which wasn't anything I wanted to do, but, and there we were. Yeah. So I really don't know in terms of who talked to who. I have no idea if that even happened, but it certainly seemed like from the outside looking in.
Yeah. Lily, what was your takeaway about the operations of city council and city hall from doing this story?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, welcome to our world.
Thank you. I mean, I think I shared a similar reaction to everybody else, because, I was probably, not to compare, I don't know anybody else's reaction, but I was just thoroughly shocked, because getting so invested in learning so much through doing the story and like reading the fine print, like the consent items, just making sure that, I had all the facts. And then in the last second, I was just like, I didn't even know that was possible. I remember, I swear, like one of our reporters at KEYT put it online, and I called her up and I was like, hey, I think you made a typo. Like, it's supposed to be $3, not $2. And she was like, no. Like, wait, you're gonna have to explain that one to me. So like going forward, do you think that's gonna kind of create some sort of like, you're always gonna kind of have to have some sort of backup plan? Like, were you prepared to kind of combat that when they said, well, how about, we're gonna lower it to 2?
Good question.
Yeah.
No, I mean, once again, I kind of count on the procedure being the procedure.
Right.
And so taking this special thing off of consent and continuing it, to me, you would continue it at the same status on consent, Well, the administration decided we're going to do an administrative item, so we go ahead and pass the ordinance on that same day. And I was, as they say in England, gobsmacked by how this went, because and I, it was one of those humming moments. I had no idea what was going on. My colleague Eric Friedman, same thing. We just went, what is this? And by the way, as we're coming into budgets, and everybody's going to talk about, oh, we can't cut this, oh, we can't cut that, but then we blew off $500,000 a year by doing what we just did. I'm going to be interested to see how people fly their flag for the rest of the budget season.
Yeah. Well, Randy, I want to congratulate you. You both scratched your head and were gobsmacked, even though your head exploded over this. So that's,
one of these, that was getting pretty flat right up here if you hadn't noticed.
all right. Well, I think I don't know. It's obviously I think testament to the power of the downtown restaurant businesses and the business leader and Bob Stout and those kind of people, because obviously, somebody got to them. All right, Josh, what else you got for the mayor?
Well, I just want to say Bob Stout, I think he's a good guy. I think all of those business owners are good people. Of course, they're going to want the lowest fees possible. Like, who wouldn't, right? It's not their fault that it's $2. I wouldn't blame them. The elected officials are the ones who have to be leaders, and to be a good leader, you have to be willing to be disliked, especially when nobody's running for re-election right now.
No,
So,
I wasn't blaming them. Just to clear. I was just saying I think that's who put the screws on the members who caved in.
I'm going to ask this question, Randy. You don't have to answer it, but we are in the show, so hopefully you will. I know you're a class act, and I know you don't want to give him a platform, but Aaron Ashland has singled you out in a very, very personal way, week after week after week. He's insulted you. If that were me, I would call him up and say, if you want to talk to me face to face, I will meet you, and you tell me everything you're saying to my face and stop trying to do it publicly. I mean, that's how I would approach somebody who's reached that level of.
Who's Aaron Ashland, Josh?
He owns a downtown restaurant. But I'm wondering, Randy, do you feel anything at all? Does it hurt you? Do you get upset? Do you want to call him up and say, hey, let's just go settle this. Let's stop this. What goes through your mind every week?
To be honest with you, I find it's so off the wall, and he's always got this list of suggestions like, we got to pay the cops $1 million each, and cops are going, yeah, dude, blah blah blah. When any time somebody goes to personal attack, I know they don't have an argument. If that's their MO, that was we had a president that used to do that. I don't know if you remember him or not, but that was the whole thing, was personal attacks, calling names and whatnot. I will say this, in the interest of decorum, if he was attacking anyone else on council that way, I'd shut it down. He wants to take me on. The more he talks, to be honest with you, the better I sound, I think, from my perspective. So it doesn't bother me. He puts in his 3 minutes and off he goes. So the more bizarre he gets, the more people kind of go, so for a guy that has a public business that engenders, the public goes in and out of, I would never do something like that, because people are going to go, hey, I'm not going to Psycho Boy's place. That would, that's the way I would look at it. I certainly kept my mouth shut when I had the Paradise. Wouldn't do that, but that's his choice, and it's certainly his right to speak. But the personal insults, it doesn't bother me, but I wouldn't let them apply to anybody else on council.
Yeah. Well, and I think we got to say, Randy, that was one of the issues I think that you talked about a lot in the campaign, about restoring civility and common courtesy to the council, and I think you've been pretty successful on that. Let me just pivot, if I could, for a minute, and jump in on this, Lily, if you got anything. But this whole issue of short-term rentals that we've been talking about here on Newsmakers since 2014, I went back and checked the tape. I know that you guys approved a bunch of money to crack down on people who are doing this illegally or out of the coastal zone, which makes sense. Yeah, go and get the fees. But this argument that somehow this is going to increase our stock of long-term rentals for tenants, I don't get it. I don't see where the evidence is or why you think that's going to happen.
Okay, you asking me?
No, yeah.
Oh, okay. So,
How many
yes,
votes did you get in the mayor's race, Lily?
uh,
I have one.
so obviously the direct purpose of this is because if we're going to do all the things that we're doing in terms of, trying to control zoning issues, try to make affordable housing, try to make any rental stock increase, that's kind of the purpose behind it. Now, the anecdotes behind whether or not that's going to increase the housing stock, or whether those are the kind of houses that are going to be rented out, I don't know. Those are anecdotes, but we still have the exact same laws we've had for over half a century when it comes to all this kind of zoning. So the question is, do we enforce our laws or do we not enforce our laws? Which ones do we do? Which ones don't we do? And, years ago, we had a finance director that said, hey, if we want, we can charge these illegal vacation rentals, TOT. And I thought, and I said at the time, I go, and this is way before I was on council, I said, well, isn't that kind of like being complicit? You robbed the bank, you're a bad boy, but I get a little taste, yeah, it goes away. And I go, that's the way it felt. Well, what we did was we made the bed for ourselves in that. And then we started issuing business licenses, but we never told people it was legal per se. And then we started collecting TOT, and now so the city has really been a bad actor in this, in past history. The zoning hasn't changed. And I have asked people who are in big favor of doing STRs everywhere. I go, bring me some language. I'm not carrying water for this. How do you think it should work? Well, it happens other places. I go, I know it happens other places. That's not the answer I'm looking for. Haven't heard anything from anybody. So what do? I mean, there are places that are zoned for hotels and zoned to allow them. We've made the process to get into that business pretty onerous, the official process. So maybe that could be reformed and not even change the zoning, leave it as is. I think that's a possibility. But in terms of the rest of it goes, we're enforcing the laws that are on the books.
Yeah, what's the cost benefit of how much it's going to cost to do the enforcement, how much we're going to get back?
Right. So it's a little bit of a false narrative because it has this big number up front and then a little number on the recovery, but one's the first time expense and one's kind of the annual potential recovery. And once again, we don't know. You can look if you just look and count online, you can find 1,500 vacation rentals that are out there. And this has always existed in Santa Barbara, but when Airbnb came along, they just blew it sky high. They were going, hey, Jerry, what are you doing with your house? What's on vacation? Well, look at me making money for you. And then boom, everybody, jumped into this thing. So I can see both sides of the argument, but when people buy their homes in a residential neighborhood, they have a right to expect that the conditions surrounding the neighborhood are going to remain relatively the same. And they're not going to be next to a business. And oftentimes those STRs are in fact much more better maintained, better maintained than the long-term rental that somebody might have, especially down in the Mesa where I live. But that, once again, we didn't change the law, so are we just going to enforce some and not the other? I don't know. That's
yeah. Lily, your presence here is representing not only 51% of the nation's population, but also Gen Z, people who use Airbnb, quite frequently for travel, I'm sure. Do you feel that the city in going after this is sort of standing in the way of the future?
I don't even know if I would. No, because I think Airbnb is probably just the beginning of many more just like it. I feel like it's just kind of ahead of its time, and I'm sure that more businesses like that are going to open up. And so that kind of also, I wanted to ask the plan of how you guys think you can enforce, tracking down who's, providing an Airbnb versus if somebody's just staying as a friend, or do you do it through a business, or how, yeah, how do you guys manage to enforce it?
Yeah, good question.
Well, I mean, the tracking it down is why we're hiring this firm that does this kind of thing. And once again, people don't realize there's a lot of complaints out there as well about, just the fact that people have Airbnb next to them or whatever. There are a fair amount of houses in Santa Barbara that were bought as second houses, and people maintain them by renting them out on short-term rentals, coming out for their little vacation thing, going back away, or, maybe, Chip and Buffy are going to school at UCSB and they're going to come in from Maine to stay at that house 2 weeks out of the year and try to rent it out otherwise. So when you have a constrained housing stock, it's a little disingenuous for us to do that and be a part of that business by collecting the TOT and then, bark at our developers or our landowners that they're not providing enough housing, vis-a-vis whatever mechanism we get. So once again, it's trying to find some consistency. We actually put out Eli from Community Development put out a thing where, well, look, maybe we can do it where if it's owner occupied and people, oh, I didn't want to do that, but think about it for a minute. Somebody can own a home and say, I'm going to France for a couple of weeks and I just wanted short-term rent. I mean, that would be an owner occupied situation. I mean, maybe there are a million possibilities. We will agree on 0 of them, but we also don't want to be like Mission Bay in San Diego, where it's all rentals in the summertime and then longer term rentals in the wintertime. But in those communities, you don't need post offices or schools or, it's not a community anymore. And so we can talk about the monetary benefits all day long and the qualitative benefits or the negative parts of it. Right now, our job is just to figure out a way to enforce the law. And I don't know what the end result is going to be or the cost benefit thing. That's all theoretical at this point.
Hey, Josh, go ahead. Lily.
I was just going to ask if you guys anticipate how this would affect tourism at all.
How would it affect tourism?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I mean, I certainly use Airbnb when I travel from time to time. I've done it. I'm full disclosure, except I never travel anymore for some reason. I don't know why. It hasn't been shown that Airbnb is in fact a cheaper alternative to hotel stays. It hasn't been, it might be if you have an entire family, maybe it's cheaper, but room for room, that's not necessarily, there's no numbers out there that prove that. Well, this is an argument we went through in the coastal zone. Coastal Commissions wants us to be able to provide visitor serving benefits in the coastal zone. And in their theory, STRs are actually do that. And we go, where's the statistic? And there's none, they're just anecdotes. And you've also got your small hoteliers, the little independents that are going, hey, we're paying all this. We've got all these, fees, permits, 24/7 surveillance on our hotels. We're there at the desk. And then why are you letting, Bob Jones next to me compete on that level? So, there's a lot of different aspects to this argument.
No, Josh, I want to double back on this question though of, and again, I think Randy makes a lot of sense on the financial argument, but the notion that this is somehow going to, ease our vacancy rate for residential rentals, I don't see it. Do you?
Well, I think that this is one of those things where it sounds good in concept, but you really can't legislate human behavior. And we see conservatives trying to do that all the time, and they should just stop and let people live their lives and do what they do. And in this case, yes, it would be amazing if all of these people who had second homes or had rooms in their house said, you know what, I'm going to rent to a working class family that would otherwise have to go to Ventura, Oxnard, Lompoc, wherever to live. And that will cut down the commutes and we can be a more sustainable community. It would be awesome if every family who had that kind of space and a vacation rental chose to do that. But the reality of human behavior and capitalism, and when it's so expensive to live in Santa Barbara, is good people, nice people, normal people, not people we want to demonize, are going to want to make, $3,000 a month. I mean, sorry, a weekend or something. on a vacation rental because it helps them. It helps them live the lifestyle they want. And, you know, maybe they have kids in college, or maybe they just want to build up a big bank account, or they want to plan for their retirement, whatever the reason is. I don't think that any crackdown on illegal vacation rentals is going to cause people to say, you know what, let me go rent to a family who's got a couple of kids in, you know, partying school or something like that. Like, I don't think that's going to happen, because Jerry, you wouldn't do that because you want your privacy. You know, you want your home for 5 days a week, okay? Or you want to have that other place available when you want it. And so it's too bad, but it's just, I don't think it's just going to happen. You can force people to not have legal vacation rentals, and you can force them to pay transit occupancy taxes, but you cannot force people to put people in their homes so they don't want to be there if they're not in the business of property management and renting. So I don't think it's going to, but I do think, hey, if we can collect a little bit of taxes on these people who are doing it, then maybe that we can use that for something good for the city. So maybe there is some benefit there.
Well, that's you're making my point, actually, Josh, is that we could argue those logic points back and forth all day long, but the end of the story is it's still in our code. It's what people, when you pass codes, it's kind of like I was talking about council procedure earlier. The public has an expectation that things are as they are written down. So until there's some kind of switch or whatever, we're not going to do just because it's the flavor of the month. Or if we, you know, if we're going to write a new code, well, let's write a new code. But, you know, that, you know, in and of itself brings these controversies to a head. So I'd almost rather try to re-legislate this and see what we came up with. And we tried it once and we got booed out of the room. So, and that was pretty recently. So
Randy,
there are a lot of people that have long-term multiple unit houses that have gone to the STR thing because, like you said, Josh, it's more profitable. And before, they were renting to just normal market rents. And I know a lot of landlords in town who say, hey, you know, I could go STR, but frankly, changing, you know, doing what it has, managing the property, the expense of every time I turn over a client, you know, it doesn't really pencil out, or it's just too much of a pain. I mean, landlords don't really like changing tenants if they can help it, contrary to popular belief. So,
yeah,
there's a couple sides of the coin. There's no doubt about it.
all right, but Randy, Josh just made an interesting point. He said you can't legislate human behavior. Will you pledge? You can't legislate human behavior. So will you pledge today to tell your colleagues that?
You know, I actually have. You know, I've been thinking I was speaking English, and I thought we were all having that same kind of linguistic commonality, and turns out we're not. So I don't know.
All right, Lily, you got anything else for the mayor?
I almost just
On
said
anything.
on short-term housing. No, I don't think so. I keep thinking about, there was one time I had a friend visiting from Ireland, and we were looking at all of these hotels, and like we landed on an Airbnb that was just, I also live on the Mesa, funny enough, and it was just right over the hill, like in that little area over there. And the price, like, not only was the price just so much better for the week, but like they also got the whole experience rather than like staying in a hotel. Like they already had built-in neighbors, and you know, it was just, the experience was crazy. So I just like, it would be interesting to see, you know, how short-term housing would adapt, you know, if they were just in those specific zones. If you kind of still get that community experience, but.
So maybe open the whole thing up again, Randy. We're all for that here. Josh, by the way, I don't have an extra unit. I have a guest room which is filled with harnesses for maybe 5 broken down horses. Adopted. All right.
But once again, going with the mantra of housing, that everybody says a zillion times in a row, it's disingenuous for us to say we're going to allow this legal activity to go on because everybody thinks it's good, better, fun, or whatever, when we're doing it the same. Even though I can't promise you that those houses would then return to the rental market. But I mean, in my position, you got to try to be consistent, and I think consistency isn't happening right now.
All right. Hey, Josh, you've done some reporting on the budget and specifically the unfunded liabilities for pensions. You got something for the mayor on that?
Well, I mean, I think that so yes, there is a massive pension liability. Santa Barbara's not alone in facing this. I don't even know what it is now. I think I reported 350 million, and then Keith Martini said, "Oh, we're investing in this fund, and we're doing these prepayments now, and we actually dropped it to 270 million." So it's a large number. I guess the question would be: is we're heading into the budget season, and every department has to make cuts. I covered a Parks and Recreation Department commission meeting. It's going to come to the council. They want to cut one recreational after-school program wrap at Monroe to save $70,000. Okay, so like every little bit helps here. And here's the city facing these massive pension liabilities. And by the way, we're only going to charge $2 a square foot downtown. Okay, we won't go back there. But I guess the question to Randy is, do you feel like you've got the pension situation as manageable as it can be, or what can you do here going forward to address this situation that was created by lawmakers and legislators long before you?
If you ever looked at the formulas that go into the PERS calculations, I mean, I wasn't particularly great at calculus, but wow, it's really something. And they're based on a lot of assumptions, and it's out. Those liabilities go out for very many years based on people's life expectancy, salary expectancy, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, so each one of those obligations is part of a departmental budget. So it's in the budget. It's there. It's visible, blah, blah, blah. So yes, each department has been tasked with, we need you to cut by whatever, Rebecca directed them to do. And so, yeah, they're picking up all the seat cushions and looking for the nickels. And those are the things they have to present. They're the things that, for example, Park and Rec programming is something that they have to look at what the participation rate is. They have to look at the return versus expense rate is, all of those things. And they're budgets that none of us want to cut. We don't want to cut the library. We certainly don't want to cut public safety. But at some point in time, we got to get up to where we're not dipping into reserves for normal operations. Those reserves are meant for emergency times, like we just had with COVID. They're not meant for our regular operating, because that's a downward spiral that's going to end up in a really bad spot. So we're not in horrible shape in the scope of a almost $400 million budget. We're going to come up with $1.1 million to maybe potentially $3 million deficit that's scheduled if we don't make these cuts. So even though that may sound like real money to most of us, in the scope of things, it's not the end of the world. Or basically out of $160 million general fund budget is really more what I'm talking about. But it's still, it's.
And we can always just pull it from Measure C, Randy. I mean, come on, that's
pull everything else from Measure C.
You've been following the GLEDA debates over the sales tax and whatnot, what to use with it. Measure C was specifically put forward for capital projects, and the voters were really clear about that. And there's no governor. You could dip into Measure C, which is, I think, a slippery slope. I certainly don't want to go down. I'll resist that.
Well, you were out there campaigning for Measure C, and you assured us that wasn't going to happen.
Well, here's what I assured. I assured that it wasn't union payback, and then I get back into chambers, and we passed the PLA, and I went, "Thanks for that." There's, so.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Greg.
I get rolled a lot in there.
Yeah, but what about this point that Josh raises about the pension liabilities? Because even though you can kind of do stuff around the margins, in the short term, the trend line is, it's going to be the cost that eats the city budget. I mean, is there any long-term thing that city can do as a local government about that?
Well, the only control you have over what the PERS thing is, you got a couple things coming up. You have the classic old guys, and as they age out and you get into the next tier down, especially like in the police contracts and whatnot, it gets a little less onerous. But in the long term, it's going to be salaries and benefits. And, you start looking at, can we keep these positions, or we need to contract them out? And you find a lot of municipalities having to do that. We're not to that state yet, and I hope we don't get there. But it is onerous. And of course, our biggest two departments are fire and safety, which are also our first priority departments. So, like Josh said, you're going, well, you're going to grab the $70,000 out of Parks and Rec when you've got these tens of $1 million budgets and these other things. And so what makes sense? What's fair? What do people expect when they pay their taxes? What kind of services did they expect? And, we can cut all day long. People go, wait a minute, I paid for that program. That's why I agreed to this tax. So these are tough decisions. So when we deny, I'll pick on my colleagues again about the State Street thing, but when we deny even doing something like that, because we want to make a few people on State Street feel good about those things, I'm not really sure what the motivation was. I don't know who talked to him. But then it comes down to like, okay, we're going to cut this Park and Rec budget, which is also a general fund, just like that would have been general fund. Did we do the right thing?
But then you get whipsawed. I don't know how many police officers were down. A large number. I mean, a significantly large number. And how are you going to attract people if you don't give those kinds of pay and benefits?
Well, I got to tell you, we did give a 9% bump to cops over and above everybody else in that last go. So because of retention, recruitment issues, but I just had a conversation yesterday with a couple of our rank and file, and there goes, what really matters, because we'll never have been able to, never will be able to buy our way out of this situation. It's an expensive place to live. That's just the bottom line. And it's always been that way. Can we build housing for them? Maybe, but is it housing they're going to want to live in? We've tried that before. It hadn't really worked out. So culture, internal culture is huge in departments. And between, we had cultural issues many years ago that really bit us in the butt. But when you had, Lori Lunell, Barney Malekian, and Al Kelly are all big on this internal culture thing. And the rank and file, when you run into them, not one of them has said boo about the oversight process they went through. It was frankly pretty insulting on a lot of levels, but they'd go, we're just coming to work. We'll do what you tell us to. They'd like to have more money and more benefits and whatnot, but the way they really want to have is that kind of respect in the department and the inner functionality that I think we're pretty good at, and we're getting better at it. And Kelly Gordon's really attuned in with. So I think we're making progress, but it's not Camelot. We're not going to get to, at some point we'll start getting, we got 8 recruits in the academy right now. And, we'll hopefully start building those numbers up, but we got people retiring out at the same time. So.
Yeah. All right. We got time for 2 more questions real quick. Josh, you got anything else for Randy?
Well, it was only 2 more questions. We'll really put Randy on the spot here. Mayor Rowse, I recently wrote about a lawsuit filed against the city, Nina Johnson. I know the answer here. I'm not going to say anything. But Nina
that's not going to stop him from filibustering.
He's going to ask anyway. I know.
Maybe there's something you can say. Okay, no. So Nina Johnson filed this lawsuit. Harassment, retaliation. Big shocker, big surprise. I know you can't comment about pending litigation, but I'm just wondering if you could sort of talk about, one, if were you surprised? Did you see that coming? Also, overall morale at the city in terms of staffing levels. I was told there was some engagement survey that was done last year, and it showed, some levels of unhappiness in the departments, which of course you're going to find everywhere, but
not on Newsmakers. Nobody's happy on Newsmakers.
We've had lots of new department heads, lots of turnover, new people. With Nina Johnson's lawsuit sort of as a basis for this conversation, how is morale at the city right now from your perspective?
Well, from my perception, and I really do try to spend as much time out in the departments as I can and talking to individuals, department heads and their staffs and whatnot. Well, I'll go back to when I first got on the council. People asked, how did you find it? I was amazed because I was always critical of City Hall and things that went on here. And I was always amazed at the amount of talent and skill and dedication we had, going all the way down to the guys that filled the tree wells in with bark on up to the big executives. I find that other than our staffing issues, which every industry is going through right now, I mean, starting to get better. We're getting a lot more applications in now, and people having to wear more than one hat and doing their job. I find morale pretty high. You won't hear that obviously from the unions because that's not the union's job. But when you go out and talk to the rank and file, I mean, it's a very separate deal from talking to the union reps. I find that people with pride in their jobs, pride in their city, and they may want to have this or that within the system, but I don't find any kind of malaise or anything that will lead to the situation you're talking about. I don't really, whatever details I know about that. Once again, we're not on the record here, are we? Oh,
No, it's just between us.
Oh, good. No, that, I mean, you're right. I can't say anything about it, but I don't think that's emblematic or systematic or any kind of infectious issues that are going through the system. I don't feel that at all. I would be very sensitive to that. I was an employer for a lot of years, and I know that attitude is contagious and it can really hurt an organization. I don't think that's where we are at all.
All right. All right. Lily, for people who don't know you, you grew up here, right? And graduated from Bishop Diego, go Cards.
Yeah, go Cards.
A card, always a card. And then you went off to Cal Poly, is that right? And graduated and came back. So you're one of these rare people that Josh is trying to track down who grew up here and have returned now and trying to make it. What's your, I mean, how have you found the housing situation? I'm just curious. I don't want to be personal about it, but how have you dealt with that issue?
Well, Jerry, I live at home. I do. I pay a small amount of rent to my parents, but that's how I make it. Lucky enough to have grown up here, but I have experienced a lot of the different sides of housing in Santa Barbara because I moved here from New York when I was 5. Like my family, my brothers we were all in grade school. We were at Cold Spring Elementary School, and then when I was in the 4th grade, the T-fire hit and that took my house. So after that, I've moved to all these different places in Santa Barbara. I've seen the thickness of our community. That was just the way that I know one of the things you wanted to talk about was airport noise, and I've been muting myself every once in a while so that it doesn't get in the way. But I've just kind of gotten to experience all these different sides of housing. But as for cost right now, personally, I'm hanging in there, but it's just been a beast. I mean, here and in San Luis Obispo, and then my older brother went to Santa Clara University. It's all California, but here, I'm in a pretty comfortable spot living at home. So seeing it with my coworkers and my friends, it's just like an everyday battle that you just kind of got to get through somehow. But a lot of people commute from Oxnard or the Santa Maria area. So does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, no, there's your lead, Josh. It's a beast.
Yeah.
I will add one thing though, because if you read Sheila Lodge's book, they had the word housing crisis was a coined phrase back in the 1930s for Santa Barbara. So we talk about it. And when I graduated from UCSB, there was not only a water hookup moratorium, and then no new meters have been approved, and there was also downzoning in many of the neighborhoods. So you can imagine a bunch of college guys coming out and trying to get a place to rent. That wasn't happening unless I happen to know a couple of people when we finally got in, but it was, how many people could you stack in a room even back then? And the numbers today would seem really silly, but we were also, making a couple bucks an hour. So it's, it's always been a struggle. I mean, the real estate value is completely peaked. And frankly, when we went to the $5 plus CPI minimum or rent cap, or 5% plus CPI, it took a lot of landlords who have been here for a long time and were providing market or below market rent. And it took them right up there because they just felt like they had to maintain their base. So there's a lot of factors at work here, and from both sides, there's a lot of pain. So
Supply and demand. Yeah.
Supply and
All
demand.
right.
We're building up from here, you look from La Cumbre out to Winchester, you can't believe how many, I mean, Lily, you grew up here. I mean, look how much, or Josh, how much housing, it seems like it's coming up out of the ground everywhere. So at some point, that supply should help ease the demand, but we'll see.
Yeah. All right, Randy, you've been really generous with your time. I appreciate it. Real quick though, what's the latest on the specific plan at La Cumbre? I know you and Doss Williams have worked really closely together on that. What can you tell us?
I don't know what's going to happen with the eventual specific plan. They fought it, they won that battle. We lost the funding, the grant funding that would have paid for that specific plan, including the CEQA analysis. So now there'll have to be some kind of another kind of development agreement worked out. But you've also got the family that owns the Sears property, and that one big parcel between the freeway and State Street should be done in a contiguous planned manner. Now, we ended up turning that whole we ended up scoring a couple of points for them when Planning Commission got on the case of the Wright family for their specific plan from 1983, which specific plans don't expire. And we said, oh, you can't do that. We need housing there. And they're going, well, actually, yes, we can do that. And we have to do that because that's what our plan says. So we're doing a lot of stumbling around from time to time. We need to kind of figure all this out.
All right. Mayor Randy Rowse, thank you so much for being with us. Lily Dallow, it was a great pleasure to have you on. And we hope you'll come back. And Josh Molina, as ever, international man of mystery and the Joe Rogan of Santa Barbara. Thank you all for coming. And we'll see you next time on Newsmakers.